Be Stony Brook. Also, Sweet 16. And when a mid-major gets this deep, we're always ecstatic. And St. Peter's certainly has done so. And we're going to be talking about that a lot. We got some baseball. Stony Brook baseball. And what a performance they put on over the weekend. Women's lacrosse taking care of business as usual. Men's lacrosse running into a little bit of a third quarter wall yesterday. But all that coming up. And you can join us in the conversation. The number to call, of course, is 631-632-9872. I was about to give you the wrong number there, but it's 9872-631-632 WUSB. Matt Mankiewicz, Ken Furman, Greg Taylor. We are here. We are live. And guys, how's it going?
Well, it's great to be here. We're just watching a lot of March Madness, of course, besides all the Stony Brook action. I mean, what a heck of a tournament that's gone down already, huh, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, if your bracket's still alive, then you're a better man than I am.
You're a miracle worker, if that's the case, because it only took me 1 day for my bracket to get busted. Thank you, St. Peter's, for that.
But that's what it's all about. That's why we watch, right? That's what brings us in, and that's what gets us to watch. We feel like we know better, and the bracket and the tournament lets us know that we don't.
So where do we want to go first? Because, of course, there's still a couple of games being played right now, are there not? We have some late action in the NCAA tournament. Miami and Auburn in particular. You have 2:49 left in that one. And that's the 10th seed Miami in the process of upsetting the 2 seed Auburn, Charles Barkley's alma mater. And, of course, they never let them forget it. 70-58 the score in that one. At the half, 3rd seed Purdue leads 6th seed Texas 36-30. Early going, 9th seed TCU leads top seed Arizona 12-6, but that's very, very early. But might as well run down the finals. But, again, we'll be segueing back into Stony Brook momentarily, but those were games that, are in progress. A 4-5 matchup, which seems to be relatively rare because of all the upsets, the 12s being the 5s and the 13 being a 4, but 68-53, 5th seed Houston beat 4th seed Illinois. And Villanova took care of business. 2nd seed Wildcats beat 7th seed Ohio State 71-61. Mike Krzyzewski's career continues because the 2nd seed Duke Blue Devils beat 7th seed Michigan State 85-76, and the 11th seed Iowa State Cyclones beat Wisconsin 3rd seed 54-49, and Texas Tech took care of Notre Dame 59-53, and that's just the men. The women get just as interesting, but let's start. Where do you want to begin with this?
Got to start with some lacrosse action, I think.
Yeah, because I'll tell you something. Baseball had a very nice weekend and won 2 games in dramatic fashion. And a game, one of those aired today here on WUSB. I did that game. I also did the Syracuse game. Let's start with the women because that. And women's basketball, they ended their season WNIT facing a former coach of theirs, Bethel Boyle, and Virginia Commonwealth, the Rams. They lost that one, and we can make all kinds of arguments, and we did when we aired the game, about whether or not the 2-week layoff that they had played a part, but a defensive-oriented coach facing another defensive-oriented coach, as Greg liked to point out, and the better defense won.
Yeah, I would say so. And I was actually really impressed with the call by Coach O'Boyle there when she decided to go into the full court press. I actually thought that was a risk on her part when she did that. But what she wound up doing, because Ken, like we were saying at that point in time during the game, the bigs for Stony Brook had 22 of their points. And essentially what she did by putting the press out is not that she was looking to turn Stony Brook over, although they did once or twice. Really what they were doing is pulling them out of their rhythm in their half-court game and forcing the guards to shoot a little more. And initially I thought that might be to Stony Brook's advantage, but the guards came up cold and VCU wound up going on a run there in the second half.
Yeah, it was a big difference between the second quarter and third quarter. Second quarter, the Seawolves shot 50% and held the Rams to 33%, and that allowed them to take a 29-27 lead to the locker room. But as you said, Coach O'Boyle, she made the shift defensively, and it actually did force a lot more turnovers, 5 to be exact. But I think a big thing as well was offensively for the Rams. They scored because they got a lot of second chances. They out-rebounded the Seawolves 9-0 offensively. And it'll help them score 4 extra points on turnovers and 6 more in second chance points. So when you get 13 of your points in that quarter, just coming off mistakes Stony Brook made or their inabilities, it was really a difference maker in that contest, Greg.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe how cold Stony Brook got in the third quarter, only scoring 8 points and then on 11 in the fourth quarter. I mean, you're talking about that 8 points might be the lowest that they scored in a quarter all season long.
It's close with that main game. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, and the other thing that we had mentioned, Ken, early on in the broadcast was that, how would the 3-week layoff help and or hurt the women? And I actually think probably wound up hurting them. I think they lost their legs a little bit with that kind of a layoff. Yeah. What do you think?
That first quarter they were a bit sluggish, but they started to pick it up towards the end of it. Second quarter was the best quarter of the game. But to me, I say you run out of gas. That's just what it looked like. Like there was just nothing left by the time the fourth quarter came around. And defensively, they actually held the Rams without a field goal for the last 5 minutes of the game. Problem was they really couldn't convert too many of their own. And they just were geared to slower than the opposition. And, it's tough to beat a team that way when, you're able to stop them defensively, but the offense has nothing to show for it.
Yeah, and I also think you're looking at, let's get VCU credit as well, too, the players credit as well. I think that they were a little bit bigger, faster, stronger, maybe.
Yeah, well, the big star of the game goes to Ty Robinson. I mean, she had a heck of a performance, game high 20 points, 8 of 19 from the floor. The 5'10" graduate did. And, she proved her worth, being named to that All-Atlantic team as one of the best guards in the country. Just her ability, I thought, to do several pull-up jumpers, get open, get her teammates open to shot the ball. She did everything great, offense, defense, passing.
Yeah, and I remember at one point in time during a game thinking to myself, wow, she really has to get going. And then we looked at the box score and she had 10 points. And it was just
it was the second quarter, yeah.
Yeah, and we were thinking to ourselves, man, what a unassuming 10 points, but then she took over really in the second half and made her mark in the second half. She had a quiet 10 points in the first half, I think. And then in the second half, she really got rolling. And that was a major difference for VCU.
No, absolutely agree. So, yeah, it puts a bow to the Stony Brook season. Great.
Yeah, and I would have to say for VCU, they could be one of the teams that has a real good opportunity of winning the WNIT.
Yeah, they played really well when they were hot. We saw in the game they were unstoppable. Because they went on runs, and even if they weren't necessarily scoring every time they had possession, they were eating a lot of the clock. They were obviously stepping up defensively. They were just playing tremendous basketball, and they face Seton Hall tomorrow evening in New Jersey, so it'll be a fun matchup there. And the winner of that one will face the winner of Drexel Bucknell, who also play tomorrow. So, it'll be fun for sure, especially seeing the rest of the bracket with teams like Boston, Quinnipiac, Columbia in round 2 as well.
Guys,
I think that's a fun little tournament there for the women. That's a nice bracket that you're looking at right there. Those are some quality teams.
Well, here's something that we've done this. We kind of did it after the regular season ended with the Albany game, losing their last 2 and losing the regular season championship, which would have gotten them an automatic WNIT bid. Very fortunately for them, it didn't matter because they got in anyway. But it's very hard. It's going to be hard for the other sports too to really evaluate the season because of the effect of that America East ban, I think, because they could be in the NCAA right now. Or actually, they may get knocked out in the first round. You don't know, but
they may got knocked out first round.
Yeah, but the whole point remains is that the chances of them making the NCAA tournament, they were dominating in the America East Conference before the bomb was dropped, and they did bounce back. They lost a tough one to Maine on February 12th, but then they won 3 in a row, and then 2 tight ones, UMass Lowell and Albany by a point. And Albany ends up winning the America East of all schools. So here we go. Okay, the Seawolves. I think on balance, it was a solid season. I mean, the graduates took care of business as best they possibly could under the circumstances that were allowed them. And where do we go from here?
I think that's a real good point, Matt, because you don't have that opportunity, right? Because you listen, they're 23-6 on the season. It's an excellent season for the women. They've
without a doubt.
A handful of wins against Power 5 conferences, which you feel really good about as well too.
And that got them in the WNIT without a doubt.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That had to be the reason why they got the at-large bid. And I think, like you were saying, not given the opportunity to play in the conference, that kind of tournament, I think that kind of gives them a little bit of an edge as well too, because you would have, should have, could have. But I think for Coach Langford, for her first season at the helm, I thought she did a great job. She had a really good team, and she did a great job with the really good teams. Listen, you could have a really good team and do a bad job with them, and things could fall apart very quickly. And that didn't occur for them. But where do you go moving forward? I mean, you're losing a lot of really good players. You're losing your three bigs.
Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing, Greg, is that they need to replenish their forwards because, as you said, your primary bigs in Boucher, Pagan, Wool, all graduates, so they're not coming back. Your next big is Narma Reyes, who's a 4, and she's a senior. So she has I believe she can come back for another season if she opts to. And so, assuming she doesn't stay, your next forward is Keelis Corley, who's a sophomore. So they need that veteranship in the bigs department. And as I said, just to find really a true center, I think, because projecting the lineup going forward, we expect, Annie Warren, who's also senior, possibly Veronica Charles as well, Gigi Gonzalez, then you got Keelis Corley and Narma Vargas Reyes, but you don't have that center that you had in Pagan and Boucher, someone who's dominant inside or clean up the glass well. And that's really something they need.
I'll tell you something. The play from their big people, I think, was basically their saving grace, because if the outside shooting wasn't there, they were always able to pound it in. By the way, between games on CBS, they ran 60 minutes, and one of the segments was a feature on Sue Bird. And we all know her long career and the fact that she's still playing, and at the age of 41, she's basically the female Tom Brady as far as women's basketball is concerned. And yes, continuing to be effective and continuing to play at a top level and no reason to stop type of thing. But that's not where I'm going. Sue Bird's game primarily revolves around the mid-range shot, not a 3. Not necessarily down low, 15-footer, something like that. And 2 points is better than none. And if you're effective from that range, great. But that's the thing that we've become, and again, men and women, both sides, so infatuated with the 3. You either shoot it from the perimeter or dunk it, or not even. Or don't even rely on your big players. How many teams have legitimate centers anymore? And that's NBA and in college, and WNBA and college. Okay, so you're not really playing in the low post very much. But the Seawolves had an excellent post game, and I think that really did serve them very well this year.
Yeah, and it's kind of too just history with the Seawolves where they're really dominant. They got a great post game, and they got those true centers, true bigs. On the men's side, obviously, big factor for that NCAA tournament run was Jameel Warden, who was a true big, was an NBA level forward center. He played a few games with Dallas in the NBA, and as I say, he's one of those guys, as well as just the past several years, how their best players, their most awarded players, especially on defense, were their centers, and Jeff Ochiri, Mo Gee, those bigs who were really dominant. Mo Gee was a guy who was also great from 3 and in terms of rebounding, blocking inside, the post, all of that. And for the women's side, they had it even better than the men this year. As they said, you got someone in India Pagan who's like that in terms of Sue Bird and shooting, or just her ability to knock down shots in the post. And obviously, Boucher cleaning up the glass. And Vargas Reyes, who's able to do both, be a good slasher and a great rebounder as well. So as I said, you're losing your top scorer in Pagan, your number 4 scorer in Vargas Reyes, in Wool, and who again was someone who's also great at the 3-point game as well, and just did a great job. I thought decoying, where a lot of defenders would expect her to roll inside, and she's out on the corner draining threes. And you lose. That's a big part of the offense that's gone now, losing 2 of your top 5 primary scorers.
So now you're going to see. It's first of all, as Greg said, great coaching job, but not your own players. Now you're going to have to bring your own recruits in and set your game up to the way you want it. And not necessarily, and again, we're going to go back a little bit more, especially when we talk about Villanova and Jay Wright's teams. If you've noticed, even the teams that won national championships, they were very different one year to the next. And that's basically how Jay Wright recruited. Didn't necessarily recruit players to fit a fixed philosophy. He recruited the best players he could find and then built the philosophy around it. And we're going to see what happens here.
I think when you make the comparison for the women to Villanova, one of the things that I will say, if they're going to take the personality of their coach on, I think they're going to be very aggressive. I think they're going to play staunch defense. I think that's just going to be, that's just who she is. So the team's going to kind of rub off on that. I don't think they're going to beat themselves, but I do have a sneaky suspicion that they're not going to be this big ever again. I have a feeling that she is going to go a little smaller and try to run the court a little more. And I don't have any inside information on that. I don't have any she told me kind of stuff. It just watching the team play and the way they go. Sometimes I felt like they were a race car that was trying to get going, but had had a couple bigs that they had to carry up the court sometimes. So I think they might go in that direction. And certainly if you can't, Matt, like you were saying, if you can't get a couple of the bigs, then I think that's the way you have to play.
Right. And, low post players have become, first of all, when we were kids, okay, Greg, you and me, every team had a big center. That was the philosophy of basketball as a general rule, let alone the NBA. College, too. And in many cases, you have 2 big centers and you use all 10 fouls. So that was a Louis Carnesecca philosophy. Does anybody remember Marco Baldi? That's basically all he was there for, is to use up all his five fouls. And guys like Jeff Allen, even Bill Wennington, who had a nice long career in the NBA. He wasn't necessarily a fundamental center. He was a guy who banged around down low, and the backcourt, Jordan and Pippen were the ones doing all the scoring. But the philosophy in basketball has gone away from that, okay? You go away from a Patrick Ewing-led New York Knicks team where he was the big man and the big man, the man overall, to a very guard-oriented game. And funny enough, I think that the WNBA had a lot of influence on that, because the women prove that you can have a very effective basketball team without having a bunch of big people around. You don't need 7-footers to win.
Well, I think if you have good enough guards, you can run the other team's forwards and centers off the court. And it's going to force you to adjust. So it's that pace of play, whoever wins the pace of play. So if you're going to slow the game down and play like half-court sets with a big, then you're slowing the pace of the play down. But if you have, 4 good guards that can get up and down the court, you might actually run the center off of the other team and force the other team to play with some guards, Ken.
Yeah, and just how it's looking like now, just to wrap the conversation, is, you expect Annie Warren, Earlette Scott, and Gigi Gonzalez. They're the top trio of guards, who are the other 3 top scorers at 2, 3, and 5, respectively, for the Seawolves team last year. And all of them averaged above 9 points and up. Warren and Scott averaged 12 and 10. So, we expect those numbers to go up, especially with Pagan and Wool's departures, and just with how much they were utilized during the regular season. I definitely anticipate those 3 names being at the top of the scoring chart come next season.
And I think Turl is a really good point there, Ken, because she really came on the second half of this year. So I think she's really going to have a substantial role on next year's team, even as much as she played a number of minutes on on Friday night as well too for
14.
the women. Yeah. So, and she played a nice little game. I like the way that she plays. She pushes the ball well. She's got good command of the offense, and she's got a nice dribble. You know, she keeps it at the same pace when she's dribbling. She never gets flustered. You never see her lose control of the handle. She is a nice game.
Okay, so we segue from one great women's team to the other great women's team, the women's lacrosse team, and one great player in particular, Ellie Massera, who had a great night on Friday at Stewart Stadium as the Stony Brook Seawolves basically cruised to a 12-6 win over the Hofstra Pride, allowing only 2 goals in the second half on Hofstra. And Hofstra, not a bad team going in. They come out, they're 6-2, including the loss to Stony Brook. And but on the other hand, Massera, half the output for the Seawolves, 6 by herself, and they continue to chug on. And again, no surprise there because they ran through the gauntlet, so to speak, with the 3 ranked teams. And they're, back on a regular schedule, so to speak, by playing they had a nice 1 week finally, or 6 days, 5 days actually, when you think about it, from Sunday's win against Johns Hopkins to this one. That's probably the longest break they've had in a while. So they were fresh and they showed it.
Yeah, and they're just about to go into another one of those run of games as well too. So they get a little break from Friday, and then it's Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. So they got like 5 games in 10 days, I think, or something like that. But yeah, a good strong win for the women. I do think it is a little bit of an indication of where they could be going, obviously going into the CAA next year, and Hofstra being, they were actually won the CAA last year, Hofstra, for the women. So, if you're going to kind of compare a little bit like we did with the women's basketball team and where they're going next year, in this one, I think you're going to see, obviously, the women be, hopefully successful, but I think it's going to be tighter games you're going to see from the women next year. But as far as this year is concerned, a good win. It's a good grind out win, like you said. And, stars are being stars, and Massera's a star.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I think the biggest jump from last year, this year, is Ellie Massera's role. Really, I think taking the role that Ali Kennedy held last year, just because of the versatility that both of them have. So before scoring, just talk about the draw control dominance. That was something Ali Kennedy excelled in. It wasn't even battling for the draw, more so just using her speed to come in and scoop up the ground ball. And that's something Ellie Massera does, and does honestly almost as well, to just as well as Kennedy has done the past couple seasons. She has 31 already through the first 6 games. And scoring-wise, 23 goals, 29 points, topped her totals from last year. And she has 19 goals in her last 4 games. So she is a huge part of this offense. And it showed in that game against Hofstra, where this is a game, I call it the Long Island All-Star game, because both teams know each other so well. Because they played with each other since grade school and high school in most cases. And club lacrosse is in there as well. So many Long Island representatives, they know each other's games inside and out. And for Massera to step up and still score 6 goals with everyone knowing the game plan she's bringing to the table, that's just impressive right there.
Yeah, Ken, I think you bring up a good point about the draw controls with Ellie Massera. It seems like she's able to do it. It seems like she could do it at any point in time, but it seems like they're reluctant to have her do it on a regular basis because then, she's doing everything in a way. Because it almost felt like, when they were going against Northwestern and they needed to win a couple draws, she suddenly was taking draws. Mm-hmm. And I think that, that happens every once in a while. It's like, all right, we really, really need to draw. Let's put Ellie Massera and see if we can inject some offense into the, after winning a draw.
Yeah, because really the primary draw control specialist is Charlotte Verhulst. She has 20 through her first 5 games. And then Claire Levy is the other draw control primary draw control specialist. She has 17. But, for Massera, it's just, I think it's first nature for her, whether she's in the circle or she's coming to get that ball. She just is so good at getting to it and utilizing her speed. And it's one of the reasons why she's so dangerous, especially on the offensive end.
Yeah, I also think that's one of those things that's an advent of, or growth from high school sports, is that when you're the best player on your high school team, and she's from Eastport South Manor, a small school. In small schools, you're required to do a lot more than you have to at a large school. And some of those small school players, they took the face off, they did this, they did it, and then they scored the goals as well too. But they did a lot of the other dirty work that needed to be done because they were the ones that had to do it. When in some of the larger schools, they can kind of be dished off to other players.
Now, as far as the rankings are concerned, Stony Brook is still at 6, and I don't expect them to go down with a win like this, but they'll probably hold serve. But here's what's going on coming up. Next up, as we mentioned, this coming Tuesday, they will go to Brown up in Providence, Rhode Island, and Stevenson Pinson's Field, which is not their football stadium. They have a specialized lacrosse facility now. We'll talk about the men's lacrosse in just a minute. But what's important here is that Brown lost to Hofstra a few weeks back. They lost 12-7 at home. So, what does that tell you? And we also lost 15-9 to Boston College, who was then number 1. So they beat Holy Cross by a goal on the road, beat Columbia on the road 14-9, and stomped on Central Connecticut 22-2, which is their last game. That was this past Thursday, St. Patrick's Day. So both teams off good wins, and while the Bears, there's not a lot of history with the Bears here, because one important thing here is that they have the history is only 2 games, and the last one was played in 2008. So, and they're 1-1. So the Seawolves won their home game back in 2007 and went up there in 2008 and lost. So, zero history. We're going back, 14 years, and, Joe Spallina wasn't even there yet, and everything's turned over on both sides. So this is a fresh meeting. It's like they never met before.
Yeah, I think that for Stony Brook next year, you're going to see a completely different worked over schedule, because you're going into the CAA, so obviously the America East schools will all be gone.
Except maybe Albany.
Yeah, I would, like we were saying last week, we would like to see Albany stay on for that natural rivalry of the SUNY schools. But Hofstra, you lose that as a non-conference game. It obviously becomes a conference game. You keep Hopkins, but who else do you put into the schedule that wants to play a Stony Brook? And that's going to become a difficult situation for Coach Spallina. Like, how do you get people? You're agreeing in a lot of cases to a loss if you're the other school. Like, what's the benefit for you for jumping in and saying, well, I'll play Stony Brook?
Well, you know what? We're talking about, it does segue into the men nicely, because that's an ongoing problem that Syracuse has had, being, the big 800-pound gorilla in the middle of the Finger Lakes region of New York State, putting together a non-conference schedule, basically after having to bribe everybody to play them, please beat the crap out of me, which is essentially what the men's basketball team does, and of course the lacrosse teams, both men and women, do to their opponents who are not in the ACC with them, and except for this year, where again we'll get there, but yeah, it's a problem. And yes, it means you have to be in a conference, and it was a big problem the first couple of years, that little limbo period between going Division I in 99-2000 and joining the America East in 01-02. So it was, and remember, Hofstra didn't want us to join the America East. They vetoed it. They wanted to stay away from us. They were basically running away from us. They'll play non-conference with us, that's fine, but they didn't want to be in the same conference with us because they didn't want to compete for scholarships. Now they're stuck with us. But it's a different Hofstra. Hofstra back then, remember, they had a powerful football program, powerful lacrosse program. Jay Wright was coaching the men's basketball team. Different athletic program altogether back then.
Yeah, and I also think the facilities were so different back then as well, too. I think Hofstra's facilities back then were probably ranking very high in the CAA, and they don't really do that anymore.
Well, the arena
they become average.
Was just built, was brand new under Jay Wright's coaching administration. So, matter of fact, it could be you can argue that was the house that Jay Wright built, and Speedy Claxton, who's the current head coach. But, there have been improvements. Short Stadium has been steadily maintained and upgraded, but they dropped the football program. It's no longer there. And the lacrosse program has been struggling. The Long Island Challenge Cup was designed for Stony Brook and Hofstra to meet in the final, and Hofstra didn't get there. So they're in trouble. Okay, but it does set us up perfectly for yesterday's matchup with Stony Brook and Syracuse, because Syracuse, of all programs, they've got their back to the wall because they were going into this thing 2-4. Okay, they just lost to Johns Hopkins, new coaching staff, and you know what? Also, a very important legacy coaching staff because of Gary Gait. Gary Gait is Gary Goat, greatest of all time, one of the greatest lacrosse players ever, and the leading scorer in the history, and 3 national championships as a player, so expectations extremely high. They start out sputtering, and Greg, we kind of saw why. Because this is not a Syracuse team that's going to run you off the field.
No, I mean, talent-wise, they do have some guys that can make it happen.
Sure, and they did.
But I felt like watching the game as well too. It wasn't a situation where Stony Brook was, outclassed talent-wise. That certainly wasn't the case whatsoever. Syracuse looked sloppy. They were undisciplined. They did win faceoffs, and they got good goaltending yesterday, which was a big change for them because they put the Bobby Gavin into the goal, and they've been flip-flopping the goalies for a couple of games there, and he played very well for them yesterday. So I thought that was a big difference because having good goaltending obviously, prevents the other team from scoring, but it lifts your psyche up a little bit when you're struggling if your goalie's playing well, and they got that yesterday. But for Stony Brook, I felt like 3 things happened to them, and you just can't, like, when you have one of them happen to you, it's bad. 2 of them, it's almost insurmountable. 3 of them occurred, and they all occurred in the third quarter. They started losing faceoffs.
Yep.
They were shooting poorly, and they weren't able to clear the ball.
Uncharacteristically poorly. They were Stony Brook teams, even dating back to Jim Nagel's tenure as coach, have been known for their accuracy. Majority of their shots are on the mark. They were not. There were a bunch of wide shots, not good shots. Yes, you can say some were compromised. They were in traffic and what have you, but that's what really did them in. And they got outscored. It was tied at 5 at the half. They scored a goal to go ahead, and then it was all Syracuse the rest of the way, 8 unanswered.
Yeah, that final half, they took 21 shots. Only 9 of them found were shots on goal. And in the third quarter, only one of them found the back of the net.
That's bad.
And it's definitely something I want to bring up too. I think the biggest eye raiser for me is that third quarter, because in the 3 losses, the main consistency has been their poor play coming out of the locker room. Go back to their loss against Brown a couple weeks ago. They got outscored 6-1 in the third. And the loss against number 4 Rutgers, they had 2 goals, which was the lowest amount of goals they scored in that period, and allowed Rutgers to double what they got. So it's just their third quarter issues, I think, are the biggest struggle they're facing right now. Because for them, and in yesterday's game especially, their third quarter struggles, although they scored more in the fourth, I thought it carried over into the fourth quarter because that was really when they were taking a lot of their bad shots, and they just weren't clearing the ball, Greg.
Yeah, and it makes you think about what goes on, at halftime. What's going what is it about the break there that gets them off their game? What is there that's going on that changes the atmosphere there? Are they super amped up for the first half and they can't get it back for the second half? Have they spent too much energy in the first half and they need to kind of tone it down a little bit in the first half so they can go into the second half a little fresher? Well, but I think it's a great point, Ken. They've been having bad second halves.
Well, Tucker Dordovic was another reason why. He is by far the best player wearing a Syracuse uniform right now. And he basically did what Ellie Massera did for the Seawolves on Friday. Generate almost half the overall offensive production and was everywhere. And wherever there was a loose ball and wherever there was a broken up play, he was there to finish it. And that, I mean, he was virtually unstoppable. Now, here's the thing. Yes, it's pick your poison, but I don't think, and I'm very sure of it, I do not think that Syracuse, just like you said, Greg, is even as deep as Stony Brook as far as talent is concerned. But Stony Brook, I think, kept shooting themselves in the foot. Again, the shooting wasn't great because a lot of it was compromised. Good defense on Syracuse's part, good goaltending, but not that good. I think the Seawolves did themselves in, I think particularly in the third quarter. Could have been closer. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they win, because it could have just been, the margin of defeat might have been a little bit narrower. But the whole point here is that, we said going in, because we read the articles, we saw the schedule, we saw the loss to Hopkins, and we said, you know what? If there's a chance for Stony Brook to knock off Syracuse, today was it. And you're kind of disappointed that they didn't do it.
Yeah. For me, definitely more so, because that was the one where you beat Syracuse. Now you're really looking at, sneaking into the rankings, getting in the top 20 spot, top 25 spot at worst, So Syracuse, if they lost this game, they're out. They're out of the rankings.
You lost to Stony Brook. Well, they've been out of the rankings. That's the thing.
Yeah, they're still receiving votes. They're more than Stony Brook. If they lost to Stony Brook, Stony Brook's taking all their votes and move it up.
Yeah, it's like Stony Brook would definitely moved up and might have broken into the top 20. But you're talking about what ifs here. What if, number one, losing by a goal to number 4 Rutgers? What if number 2, the following week, losing at number 16 Brown 10-7, a low-scoring game? What if number 3, losing to Syracuse? And remember, we're talking about the women, the gauntlet, the 3 ranked teams, and we're thinking take 2 out of 3, you're in pretty good shape, and they did. Well, take 2 out of 3, and the Seawolves would have been in great shape. They lost all 3.
Yeah, they would have been, at worst, among the bottom of the top 20. It probably would have been, a 15, 16 rank. But, you take that, especially with a more loaded ranking this year with all the Ivy Leagues back, Just looking at the schedule. If they gotten
past Rutgers, they would have been in the top 20 easy.
Yeah. And just looking at the rest of the schedule, it's America East opponents and Dartmouth on April 5th. So, your chance, I think, to really, prove yourself and get that at-large bid you need, I think the window's shut on that, or just about shut. Unless they go on a heck of a run the next 6 weeks.
And I don't even know that's going to be enough.
But I think they also have to get help in a variety of different ways. They have to go on a run. There's no doubt about it. They'd have to win. They have to basically win outright, I would imagine, to do so. And they can. Like, their schedule is set up that they can win the rest of the way through. There's not a team on the schedule that you don't think you can't beat. You have to become a big fan of Rutgers. Rutgers has to have a big run. They can't skip up or fall apart in the Big Ten or in the Big Ten tournament. They have to make it to and you'd like to see Brown, win the Ivy as well too. But Ken, I think you make a great point about, listen, there were teams that got into the NCAA tournament last year because there was no Ivy League. The Ivy is going to take at least 2 teams, maybe even 3 teams into the tournament. So now you're losing spaces. There's only 4 at-large bids to get, and for Stony to be one of those 4 at-large bids, something's got to happen. Early on, I was thinking that Vermont, the last game of the regular season, because Vermont was clubbing people early, but then they lost to UMass. So I was kind of thinking that if they were ranked and you knocked them off and you played well and then knocked them off in the last game of the season, then that kind of becomes like college football, where your best wins are at the end of the season, and that kind of catapults you up the rankings. Mm-hmm. I thought that could have occurred to Stony Brook, but I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't have been shocked if they beat Syracuse yesterday.
Me neither.
Going into the game, I thought it was something that was definitely doable. Now, I didn't think it was a guarantee, but I thought it was something that was definitely doable. Matt, I think you bring up a good point about if you had at least one of those wins, or obviously 2 out of those 3 wins, it would feel completely different, obviously. But I don't know if they would have been ranked in the top 20 by beating Syracuse.
Well, by beating Syracuse alone, I don't think so. By beating Rutgers and Syracuse, yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah. I think they'd be in the top 15 if they beat Rutgers. I think if they beat Rutgers and Syracuse, they'd be in the top 10.
Yeah, I'm looking at USILA right now and just entering this week. Syracuse had 8 votes. Stony Brook only had 2. They're the only America East, quote-unquote, team in the rankings, by the way, that received votes. So with the loss, I think that's about done. I don't see any America East team getting any votes. And had they won, they would have been 10 and bumped up to right behind Loyola Maryland, and they'd be around that 24, 25 spot, on the outside looking in. And with a strong rest of the season, maybe they could sneak in there with a team like Delaware, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, crashing, or Notre Dame, who entered at 1-3. But
I think
with the loss, it's just not happening, Greg.
Yeah, I think the story might have been not that Stony Brook beat Syracuse, but that Syracuse had lost to Stony Brook.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been more of a detriment to Syracuse, and I don't know if it would have boosted Stony Brook into the top 20 or not.
However, again, you went toe-to-toe with Rutgers, and you showed the world something that your talent level at least was such, maybe not your experience level, but definitely your talent level was up there with the big boys. And I think that's what we said even after losing. That was probably their best performance all year, despite not winning the game. But here's the other thing, and it's a reality that you have to face. This is not a big year for the America East as a general rule. The America East has had more than one ranked team in the at the same time many times, especially when the Thompsons were dominating at Albany, number 1 even. But nobody's getting any love. Albany's 1-5, okay, and Stony Brook is the only team overall above 500. NJIT and UMass Lowell are both 0-7. Of course, UMass Lowell's loss coming at the hands of Stony Brook back on Wednesday, but Binghamton's not doing anything at 3-4. Vermont's 3-6. UMBC's 2-3, and Albany's at 1-5. Yeah, they play a tough non-conference schedule, but just looking at what they've been, yes, they lose to Cornell, but they also lost by 2 goals to Drexel, beat Siena, which is their only win, lost to UMass, got blown out by Maryland, and lost to Binghamton. So you're not expecting anything from them either.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's probably the weakest the America East has been in quite some time.
Yeah, just when Stony Brook is out of it. And
I was going to say, that's kind of the worst part in that sense, to where, obviously on the Stony Brook side, you won't be able to play, obviously, to win the championship to get the automatic qualifier. But with losing Stony Brook, it's a huge detriment because, as we said, look at the rest of the conference and how poorly they're playing. They've played so far, and some teams are going to pick it up, obviously, because someone has to win the conference. But, they're going to be essentially a 16 seed, going up against number 1. And you really think they could beat a team like Maryland, like Boston, like Rutgers, one of those top-seeded teams that are up there? Not happening.
Not even close.
Like Virginia, it's not happening.
Well, who voted Vermont to be tops in the conference this year? Absolutely crazy. Losing 15-7 to Duke, and Duke is, Duke, but they lost by a goal home against Utah. They beat Penn State, lost by a goal to Brown, by the way, lost by fewer goals than Stony Brook did, beat Bryant, lost to Dartmouth by a goal, lost to Providence by 2, lost to UMass by 2, and beat up on NJIT. So they're not showing me anything either.
Yeah, we're really the rest of the country, as I said, because when you look at the rankings, it was only Stony Brook who was receiving votes. Now that's likely done, and
at least for this week.
The end of that.
Stony Brook gets a couple. And this is the same problem the women have had all these years. It's like we say, hey, they haven't lost a game in the America East Conference in 5 years. Well, the America East stinks.
Yeah.
And yes, why we get 5 seeds and why we end up facing Maryland in the second round instead of the national championship game. And that's why, in terms of the seedings, and we've been complaining about it and screaming about it, and at least in my case, for the past few years, that the women's lacrosse program at Stony Brook gets no love whatsoever. But I think all it has done is force Joe Spallina to upgrade the schedule. He's done so. And what's most important is that the women have risen to the occasion. Okay, the only bad game they've had was that one against Northwestern on the road. And you lose to a top 5 team on the road, that's not such a bad thing. because you got teams in the top 20 on both women and men with sub 500 records because those losses were against top teams, which is why the Rutgers loss doesn't hurt Stony Brook so much. The Syracuse loss might a little bit, but the Brown loss may actually hurt most of all, ironically enough.
Yeah, and the name. Well, part of it is the name of Brown. Unless Brown goes on and run themselves and gets into the and wins the Ivy. And Ken, we've danced around this a little bit. I think the men's lacrosse team has to solve two main problems. I think problem number one is they can't have a slow start in the second half anymore. I think that's got to come to an end. Matt, and the second problem they have to be able to solve is how do you stop the number one offensive player on the other team?
Yeah,
that has been their Achilles heel in every single game, even the games that they've won.
Especially when they're starting to figure out how to stop yours.
Yes, very good point. Yes,
because Palinetti did not have a great game. Palinetti needs to be. Look, it's been back and forth. You say that he takes too many shots, he doesn't take enough shots, doesn't take too many shots, and knowing when to take too many shots and not take enough shots is a big part of being a star. And yes, we've seen instances where Palinetti will take the team on his back and get him back into it. And we've seen different women's players do the same thing. And I mean, look what Siobhan Rafferty did last week. And Ellie Massera did, of course, obviously against Hofstra. So they have different players who can do that. And the Seawolves, they've got guys who can do it too. I mean, Mac can definitely do it. Okay. Palinetti can definitely do it. We've seen even DeMayo do it. Come up with big goals. So let's see it. Let's see it happen. Pearson with walk-offs. I mean, these guys are capable of it.
They really are. It's just a matter of putting it together. Just they had a bad third quarter. A lot of things fell out third quarter, but it still doesn't mean you don't fix them. They need to be fixed, and they're going into even though we've been calling them the de facto independent there. They still are going into conference play right now, and you want to see them win all their conference games. I want to see them be.
Yeah, for bragging rights, number one.
Well, the other fact is,
chip on their shoulder.
Talent-wise, they are the best team in the American East Conference by far.
Right now, for sure.
But it also matters being the regular season conference champ. And I think that means something, right? There's something to play for there. You can be the regular season. The season doesn't come to an end because you've lost to Syracuse. There's games to be played, and then other schools have games to play as well, and I think that matters. You never know what's going to happen in sports. It's just the reality of the games. That's why that's why March Madness is what March Madness is. The teams are going to lose and teams are going to win, and then suddenly you're going to be back into the mix 3 weeks from now, and you're not going to, you never thought it would occur.
Absolutely. I think that segues perfectly to baseball and what they did this weekend, Matt, because, we talk about not expecting what's going to happen. Men's baseball team conference opener, they sweep UMass Lowell, but that Saturday and Sunday game didn't look like they were going to win for a lot of that game.
Right. And especially on Saturday, okay, they were leading at the end of 6, and then UMass Lowell came up out and tied it in the 7th, but then it goes to the 10th inning, and Ryan Proto, their catcher, homers to put the Riverhawks ahead 6-5. Then the bottom of the 10th. This is yesterday. Okay, we'll get into today, but Evan Giordano and Cole Durkin homer back to back to give the Seawolves a walk-off win 7-6. Then today comes along, and the fun really starts because here we go. This game was seesaw back and forth, and the Seawolves, first of all, Lowell puts up 2 in the top half of the first. The Seawolves come back with 2 more. Then they score on a wild pitch in the second. They go up 3-2, and then Fish homers, 2-run shot, and it goes back and forth, seesaw game. By the 7th inning, Lowell get a 7th-inning stretch. They have a 7-4 lead, Lowell does. And Evan Giordano comes up with an RBI double, and that makes it 7-6. And then disaster strikes in the 8th as Genther for UMS Lowell singles the center, and that makes it 8-6. And then in the 9th, they add another run, 9-6. And then the 9th comes along, and the Seawolves, we got Brown Air homering and Giordano right back to back. Brown Air is a 2-run shot with a man on. So Giordano
literally
homers.
back to back. Next pitch back to back.
Yeah, next pitch back to back makes it 9-9. Go to the 10th, and Lowell walks the bases loaded, and Giordano is back at the plate. Now, that tells you something right there, okay? Giordano homered, and then they batted around into the 10th, and still not having scored a run because of all the commotion that was going on, and Giordano walks. And that... Yeah, and then Evan Fox comes in, and they get the walk-off win 10-9. Sweep the series, go 3-0 to start the America East schedule. And let's see, taking a look at the schedule here. Do they go up to UMass Lowell later? And they do not. Okay, they do not. But that would be a great rematch if they did. But great start to their schedule. So that also puts them on a 4-game winning streak because after getting swept at Old Dominion last weekend, they won the midweek game against Iona 9-1. So they win the Friday game 6-4, but the pitching not that great, but the hitting able to respond, keep the Seawolves in it, and they eventually overcome.
Pitching, I thought, was at its best on Friday. Oh, obviously Wednesday you won 9-1, but that was against a more inferior opponent in Iona. And Kyle Johnson actually got the start, and which kind of goes to show where the bullpen's at. Filling in obviously for Nick DeGennaro, he's out for the time being with shoulder surgery. So with Johnson starting, he threw 3 scoreless, and they relied on the bullpen the rest of the way. But and that Friday game too, Ben Farrow I thought pitched good. The senior pitched 6 1/3 innings, allowed 3 runs, but did strike out 4 batters, only allowed 1 walk. But yeah, I think the biggest thing they picked up against Old Dominion was just their hitting, because offensively, they were impressive. I think the entire week, and the big thing really were the home runs. I think in every game they homered at least once, and obviously in today's game homering a couple times. They're just this game alone, 10 runs and 15 hits are both season highs, and the 3 home runs matched the year's most just from yesterday. So you got 6 home runs in 2 days. It definitely goes to show the bats are waking up and had a good time as well, Matt.
Yeah, perfect. And the weather's been favorable. It was a good weekend all around. Got a little overcast and windy today, but still, wind was a little more than a nuisance. Funny thing is that as far as the long ball is concerned, the Seawolves didn't necessarily take advantage of that wind blowing out to right, but the home run Giordano hit, oh my God. And I even said it because the home run that Matt Brown Airing hit was to right center, just to the right of the batter's eye. And as I was calling it, I was basically waiting for it to go over the fence because it's straight in front of me. And I said at Joe Nathan Field, because the gaps are so deep, you actually have to make sure the ball goes over the fence before you call it a home run. And then the ball Giordano hits, no doubt.
No doubter there.
Bomb.
Yeah, that's big.
It's rare that people crush a ball like that at Joe Nathan Field, but I just contradict myself right there. Boom.
Yeah. And Greg, I would say I think just speaking about offense, it's so important too, especially, after a week where the offense really isn't doing much, for them to rebound and have a strong showing.
Ken, I was thinking about it myself because you talk about you kind of get right a little bit with Iona. Right, midweek, you feel good about yourself. You got one of those singleton games, you go 9-1. It also is what you expected to do early on in the season, right? If you were Coach Sank, this is how you kind of set your schedule up, was to kind of be bounced around by some of these, quote unquote, bigger or better programs, and then you get into the America East and you're firing on all cylinders. Matt, I thought you brought up a good point that the weather got warmer. That always makes the bats warm up a little bit, and you're home. You're not traveling you're not traveling down south. I think that takes we don't this is why baseball is the most difficult sport. Obviously it's the 160, was it 4 games in MLB?
Still 162. They haven't added any yet.
So, but you're on the road constantly. It's just fatiguing to do that, and to be able to be home and to play your games home this week had got to be a heaven sent for the players on the team, where they don't have to pack a bag, they don't have to leave, they don't have to. We're just right here. We're just going to play.
And just looking at some of the guys who really stepped up, Giordano, he finished the week with a slash line of 615, 667, 231. So he was getting on base almost every time he was up the bat. 2 homers, 6 runs. Brett Paulson, he went 7 for 11 and hit 2 doubles and a home run. Obviously, Brown Airing with his home runs. And Cole Durkin as well, who hit the walk-off home run yesterday. Well, that was his second walk-off hit. So, these guys now are starting to really wake up offensively. And that's big, for a team that struggled on both sides of the ball at the start of the season. Starting to see them improve in that aspect. And it'll definitely help pitching, especially when you got games like yesterday and today to where they gave up a lot of runs.
Think of it, too. Everybody, all the starting hitters, except for David Aleva batting ninth, the DH got a hit today.
It's big. Yeah, when you get hits off from 8 or 9 guys, that's consistency number one. But it's so crucial, obviously, to them scoring, just because, you essentially start off the inning, you got a guy on base. Or, maybe there's one out, and you still more likely than not got a guy or 2 on base. So you have to put the pitchers in a tough predicament to where they're pitching out on the stretch, and they got to worry about who's behind them, who's to their left, who's to their right. And it takes the focus away from the batter. It just, strengthens them more in the batter's box, obviously, because they got to throw strikes to try to get you out, as opposed to try to pitch around you and force you to swing something bad.
And I also think the other thing is too in that situation is not only are you pitching from the stretch, but you're also you're looking to the side of the field and seeing if the manager has called the next pitcher up to start warming up.
Yeah, right? Happened a lot in the U.S. Lowell game.
yeah. So you start, seriously, you listen. These guys aren't major leaguers, right? They're 19, 20-year-old kids, and they're not pitching well, and they're looking to the side, wondering, am I staying in here? Am I not staying in here? And that plays an effect psychologically for the pitchers as well too. So I think all in all, this was a great week for Stony Brook baseball, picking up those 4 wins, the bats coming alive, like you were saying. I'm intrigued to see, looking forward, Ken, the LIU in Brooklyn on Wednesday, and then they go up to Bangor, Maine, and they play 3 games on ESPN3, which is really exciting for the guys as well too. So I think, they're on a roll right now. I think if you can keep it going on Wednesday with LIU, avenge a loss from earlier in the season, and then go up in Maine. What are we thinking about Maine and what they're going to bring to the table?
Yeah, Maine and Stony Brook obviously have a lot of history together, and I think that's the big thing. Stony Brook took the last contest, but again, there's just a lot of history there, even with the players, on this back to that 2018 run where they won the championship. So, this team, Stony Brook and Maine, they both know each other, I think, better than most other teams in the conference. And, you have a Maine team that's, again, looking to win, obviously, to get themselves ahead for their inevitable playoff run, and go against a team in Stony Brook where they're coming off 4 straight wins. At worst, 4 of their last 5 games are wins. It's definitely a tougher matchup than it looked like at the start of the season when Stony Brook were dropping games left and right. Matt.
Yep, absolutely. And again, just the right time. But again, also, this is the big problem that's going to hurt the Seawolves, I think, as a general rule, is that the American East, again, not very strong this year. So, in terms of... Go ahead.
Just say for Maine, they're coming off a sweep. Well, they swept Binghamton the last 3 games.
And Binghamton's also been a thorn historically in Stony Brook's side, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, they've won a few championships themselves at Stony Brook's expense. Okay, we do have one more sport we need to cover because they had a pretty good day today as well. And I'm talking specifically about softball. They've been playing weekend tournaments all the way through. And the latest was down at Rutgers. So they inched their way further north. They still have not played a home game on the Stony Brook campus yet. but they had a sweep on the final day of the Rutgers tournament. They beat St. Peter's and Holy Cross. They first defeated the Peacocks 5-4 in Game 1, and then they shut out Holy Cross 5-0 to conclude the Rutgers tournament with, a 3-1 record. So, yeah, the day before, they beat Fairfield and lost to Drexel in the Rutgers tournament. Never actually faced Rutgers as it was the host school, but there you go. Earlier in the week, they did drop a pair at Fordham in a midweek doubleheader, but they did beat Army in the USF tournament last week. So, struggling along, leading up to the America East schedule.
Yeah. And just comparing those losses against the Rams to, the rest of the weekend, that series, those two games against Fordham, they'll have 17 total runners on base. So obviously you're leaving that amount of girls on the bases. You're not winning games. And that's why they lost by 1 and then eventually by 6 in those contests. And the offense was really lining it up over the weekend. Is beating Fairfield, obviously. That's an interesting game, too, because it was scoreless heading to the 8th inning. And then Stony Brook put 5 on the board. 4 of those coming off Alyssa Costello's grand slam, her first collegiate one as well in the top of the 8th. And then following that up, obviously, today, where the 6 through 9 hitters and Costello, Chambers, Dye, and Nuss went 9 of 11 with a triple, double, 3 ribbies, and 5 runs in the game against St. Peter's. So for them to come out with a 5-4 win against a real hot St. Peter's team, not just talking about the basketball one, but the softball one as well, which has pretty good record, that was a huge, I thought, setup for them to wrap up the afternoon against Holy Cross, where their secondary pitchers in Milas and Denman combined to shut out the Crusaders. And getting good innings, good outings out of them is so big, especially when Don Baldrug's really holding it down as the ace of this team. She's putting up, honestly, Jacob deGrom-like numbers. Like, if I told you a pitcher struck out 12 batters in one start, 13 the next, going 6-7 innings, you think I'm talking about deGrom. But it's been Don Baldrug for the season.
Well, if you're pitching 7 innings, that's 21 outs. Yep. Think about that, where more than 2/3 of your outs are strikeouts.
Yep. He's been on it. We're really picking up where she left off last season. Yeah.
The women were able to do something that Kentucky wasn't able to do this week.
That's right.
Beat St. Peter's.
Beating St. Peter's.
Well, not only that, men's basketball beat St. Peter's earlier in the season. How you like that? Beat them by a point.
Yeah. I think that means through transverse property, Stony Brook's better than Kentucky.
Yeah, the man who beat the man who beat the man.
Yeah, I think we can take that one to the bank, right?
There you go. Yep.
I'll say that the losses earlier in the week to Fordham, especially the one where they get shut out right in the second half of the doubleheader there. I think what happens when that occurs is, there's an embarrassment factor for something like that. And that kind of can wake you up a little bit. So you have the 2 losses, and I kind of saw them earlier in the week, and I was like, oh boy, that's not good for the women here. But sometimes it's those losses that get you playing well, right? Because it refocuses you to what you really need to do. And I think that's really what's interesting about the way softball schedule works out and the baseball schedule works out, where they do these weekend series, or for the softball team to do these weekend tournaments, right? And you have this tune-up game in the middle of the week, and, obviously you want to win every game. But when you lose the doubleheader like that, what it can do for you is it can just refocus you for what's coming up in the weekend. And as a coach, it gives you an opportunity to complain about something, right? Which is always something that you're looking to do, especially at this point in time in the season. And it gives you an opportunity to refocus your players, right? And I guess that's what happened for them, right? And they come back right away, and they they have a real nice tournament at Rutgers. So I think it was really good for them. I think that's a real step up for them. And I showed a lot of maturity for them as a team to do that.
But you were talking about weekend series, right? And you were down Florida International for one weekend, then San Diego for another, then South Florida for yet another, and finally you come up north to Piscataway, New Jersey. Coming up for the softball team, by the way, this is WUSB Stony Brook, a little bit after the top of the hour, the sports section. Matt Mankiewicz, Greg Taylor, Ken Furman here until midnight. Join us, please. 631-632-9872, 631-632-WUSB. But where I'm going here and where the Seawolves are going is that they will stay north. They will not go south anymore. They will not go to University Field yet. Not till the end of the month, because they still got 3 local road games. They'll be at Hofstra this Tuesday, and then they are at Fairfield for a doubleheader on Saturday. The following Tuesday, they go to St. John's, but they're not home until that Thursday, March 31st, a doubleheader against Sacred Heart. And I believe we have that on the schedule. We're going to bring that to you.
That's right. Yeah,
so,
they're going to be a fun team to watch for sure. And it's just great on the topic too, just seeing the team mature. It's big in the sense that obviously is that a lot of great players graduating from last season, and looking at the squad now, Baldrug's the lone graduate. They got 3 seniors in Shelby Dunman, Lindsay Osborne, Nicole McCarville. The rest of the team is juniors and underclasswomen. So it's just from the coaching standpoint, how big is it just seeing the team mature throughout the season, and especially as you said, those midweek games, those losses, like how big are they in terms of contributing to the growth of the team?
Well, I think it's big in a lot of ways, because really what you're doing as a coach is you're working on individual players and you're working on the team as a whole. So it's kind of like this balancing act between the two. So you're concerned about, trying to get, player X or, player Y, whoever it is, to get better at a certain skill set. And at the same time, to have the team compete, right? And I always think you, as a coach, coaches are always lying when they say that they're taking it one game at a time and that they're only focused on what's going on right now. You're really focused on everything, and you want your team to get hot right now. You want to play hot right now, but you always look at the next year as well too, because you have to. Otherwise, then you're behind, right? Because players are coming in. So as you do have these young players that are starting to develop, and I think the one thing that's interesting about what's transpired with the COVID years that all the players have given back is it takes the pressure off of having to get better in 4 years, because now you have 5 years to get better. And a lot of the players that are going to stay and play for 5 years, it gives them an opportunity to really, really work on an aspect of their game. Like if you were a sophomore during the COVID year, the coach is probably thinking, well, I got 2 more years after this with this player. Now you have 3. And I think that really changes, what you're trying to do with those players.
Yeah, we see that in Shelby Dunman for sure. Obviously, really stepping up from just an alternate reliever to now being that secondary starter, and she's improving in her performances. Obviously, getting the win at Holy Cross in relief, but starting to really step up from that vantage point. And Matt, obviously, I think that's big as well. Just seeing how much the softball team has improved over the years, and really how well they're establishing themselves in the pitching circle, and just having consistently great pitching now over the past several years.
It also means that they when you're looking at also one thing that they were able to do, I think that the baseball team really had trouble with, was have a pretty good non-conference record. Now, again, does it necessarily mean that that they're going to get an at-large bid? No, but the chances are better. And again, they're going to have their challenges in the America East Conference. I think the America East is a bit stronger in softball right now.
Definitely UMBC. They're definitely stronger than the America East and Lacrosse, for example.
Right. But I do believe that we're going to, maybe, we had some hope right now. That's probably the best way to describe it. Okay, so it's 11:12 right now here on the sports section, and it means we spent virtually the entire show last week on Seawolves Sports, and we pretty much got everything covered. Of course, I will let you know what is coming up on the WUSB broadcast schedule, because, of course, we follow these teams religiously. Had a very, very busy weekend on the air, as well as the teams themselves being busy, but we are actually going to be pretty quiet this week, because the next game we're going to be broadcasting will be Saturday. That is March 26th, women's lacrosse taking on Vermont. So, taking a quick look at the overall schedule for them, they, of course, will be home against Vermont to start off the America East, and that will be a 1 p.m. start, 12:45 here in WUSB. But then they go to Princeton on Tuesday, and then back at home again to start April against Arizona State on Friday, April 1st. So, again, keeping very busy with the women's lacrosse team. So, the following week, on the other hand, we will have that baseball game against Iona on Wednesday, March 30th. Thursday, the women's home opener, the doubleheader against Sacred Heart, 1:45 start there. And, of course, the Arizona State game for women's lacrosse. Okay, so Sweet 16 time. And time for an update, because some of these games are in the books, but some are still in progress. And the way things are looking right now, you got 3rd seed Purdue leading 6th seed Texas 65-60. Let me just regenerate that to make sure that is truly up to date. And, okay, 4:10 left in the second, Purdue 65, Texas, that's 65-58. 18-19 left in the second, just out of halftime. And Arizona and 9th seed TCU, 1-point game, 41-40. Houston beat Illinois 68-53. Villanova beat OSU. Ohio State, of course, 71-61. Duke beat Michigan State 85-76. That means Coach K is still coaching. And Iowa State upset Wisconsin. The 11th seed knocked off the 3, 54-49. Notre Dame's Cinderella run is over. Lost to Texas Tech 59-53. And Miami knocked off Auburn. Big upset there. And by a big score, 79-61. Number 2, Auburn Tigers are gone.
Wow. The unpredictability, man, it's something else. Just especially with the 2 seeds, and you know how many fell. That we were talking about earlier with St. Peter's, the 10th number 15 seed to knock off a number 2, that being Kentucky back on the first day of the tournament.
Yeah,
go
ahead.
I think that when you're looking at these, these lower. Mid-major programs or teams that shouldn't be winning. It's the fact that they've got graduate students on their team. It's the fact that they've got somebody who's a senior that's really been in college for 5 years, who's potentially playing for them. It just strengthens the type of team that they have and their belief in what they can do. The other thing it does, what COVID has done as well too for some of the players, and getting that extra year is that little bit of maturity that comes along with growing older. And that recognition that it's not going to last forever. Youth is wasted on the youth. And when you get a little bit older, you recognize that. So when you're 22, you recognize that more than when you're 20 years old. I think you're seeing that play a role right now in the tournament. I certainly have you guys watched Iowa State play?
Oh, yeah, they're another one that just played absolutely tremendously. They're the 11th seed, and they just earlier today upset number 3 Wisconsin. This is a team just last season won 2 games in its entirety.
You know what that tells you, though? That tells you how quickly you can turn a program around, because mention Beth O'Boyle and the Stony Brook Seawolves way back 10 years ago when she took over the program. Her first season was 4-24. By the time she left, it was 24-9. That got her the VCU job. But the most important thing there is that, yes, because of the turnover of players, you can turn a program around fast. Yeah. And the transfer portal helps too.
Yes. Big deal. But I think with Iowa State, I've watched them play. They can beat Miami. There's not even a question about it. They do.
Really, to me, the guy that stands out is, let me just double check here to be sure. Yeah. Is Isaiah Brockington. I mean, he is just absolutely incredible. He was a huge dominant scorer for them. 6'4" guy, transfer from Minnesota, and he went 10 for 19 that game. And the rest of the team only made 10 field goals. And you're talking about that veteranship. He's a senior, and he's a guy who I think can really, take them far. He's rating them far just with how good he played against Wisconsin and LSU.
Yeah, I tell you what, I just think that It's exciting. It's exciting. It's part of that excitement. I think he is an excellent player as well too. Does he have enough in him to continue to go? I think this is where it becomes the strain of the tournament, right? Where you're playing back to back. You play your conference tournament, you have to win to get in. Then you play in every game is a win to get in situation, and it's such a rush situation, right? You're playing Thursday, you play Thursday, Saturday, Friday, Sunday, and then you go back and you do it again. It's such an interesting tournament in that regard. Can he continue to do that as well too and carry a team?
And yeah, he's a great help too. And Gabe Kalsher, who was he's the one that actually went 10 for 19 that game against Wisconsin, and the rest of the team combined for 10. But he's another guy who really stepped it up for them. And that duel, I thought, is really one of the more impressive duels, I think, in the tournament as a whole.
Yeah, I think they're one of those teams we've been talking about, the Stony Brook versus Syracuse team, and you were thinking to yourself how much more athletic Syracuse was going to be, and they really weren't. I think you feel the same way about Iowa State. You probably thought Iowa State wasn't going to be that athletic, and they really are. They can play.
Yeah,
they're fun to watch. Yeah, they really do. So that's a fun team right there when you look at them. Kansas, Providence, Villanova does what Villanova does. They don't beat themselves. They hit their foul shots. They play within themselves. They're well coached. Them against Michigan, I'm surprised. I didn't think Michigan was going to get past Tennessee.
Me neither.
Yeah, well, that controversy surrounding Juwan Howard, and then now everybody loves him because he consoled an opposing player. You got that great picture. But look, it just shows you how fickle even the sports media can be. When it comes to Juwan Howard, I think, first of all, he's done a great job at Michigan. There's no doubt about that. And, maybe not getting a lot of love, but on the other hand, the Big Ten got plenty of love, so we really can't complain.
Yeah.
But 11 taking on a 3 and dumping them, Tennessee. But now they got Villanova, and as you said, Greg, Villanova doesn't make mistakes. And the important thing, too, and I think Jay Wright mentioned it during the Big East tournament, and I was fortunate enough to be there when he said it, is that unlike a lot of top programs, Villanova keeps its players longer than most. Calipari, as we said, the $1 billion in NBA contracts is how he gauges his success. Well, the fact of the matter is that does not translate into deep tournament runs because these guys don't stick around long enough. They don't play together long enough. That's not the case with Villanova.
Yeah, he's got really an interesting system going on in doing so. I wonder if it is his CAA days and his Hofstra days that's kind of like joined him. It just seems like, I heard this one time like years ago, and I think it's so true. You don't get what you want in life; you get what you are in life, right? And when I really think that holds true when you're coaching. Like I watched a thing on Jay Wright a couple of years ago, and they talked about he really is a family guy. Right, he really, and he just brings his players in. He treats them like they're his children. He really, really does it. You can't fake what he's got cooking there. And I think that you attract guys that want to be around this family type atmosphere. And when you have that, that's the group that fights for each other. They're really overachievers in a lot of ways. They're not more athletic than other teams. They're good. They're quality college basketball players, but you don't look at them saying to yourself, well, these guys are definitely going into the NBA,
Well, our own Jeff Bernstein knew Jay Wright from his Hofstra days and was working his camps there, and still, years after, continued to work Jay Wright's summer camps at Nova. How you like that? And part of the family.
Yeah. So and I know people that were at Hofstra when he was there. They're playing on other sports, so they would see him on a regular basis. And they just said he was the nicest guy. Like he would just say, "Hey guys, how's it going?
I'll tell you today.
What's going on?"
I'll tell you something else. Another guy's like that when he was at Stony Brook, Steve Peichel. No doubt about it. Very much the same. Always said hi. Okay, when I was in Omaha, he'd seek me out. It was, and he was. He would be there for everything. If he wasn't directly involved with his own program during the off season or something like that, he'd be at the events and always there for us too. He always was there with the post game interview. He would do the other media, but he'd always be there for us at the end of the game. and was on the sports section every single week. Loved to promote his program, loved to talk about it, and he was the type of guy very similar to Jay Wright in a lot of ways in terms of their impact on the athletic department as a general rule and the basketball program in particular, because he really did change the culture. Because the expectations after he left, after finally breaking through the glass ceiling and winning the America East, they've remained high. Bowles and Ford have seen it, and yes, have they necessarily gotten to the same heights? No, but they've definitely garnered the same level of attention, and that's because Steve Peichel revolutionized it. But there's another thing that Peichel gave us, and there was Stony Brooking as a verb. And Stony Brooking as a verb, is basically the opponent selling you short because you're Stony Brook. And I first heard it used by Matt Larson back in 2010 when we were down in Myrtle Beach. And we were playing in baseball. We were playing NC State. We had lost to Coastal Carolina in the opener in the loser bracket. NC State trying to save their pitching because they think they're going to beat us. They run their bullpen out there, and we beat them. And Larson said, they tried to Stony Brook us. And we won. Now, of course, we ran out of pitching, got walloped by Coastal Carolina the next day. But that was after that loss, rip your heart out, devastating loss. That was when Matt Sank got on the bus and said, this team's capable of getting to a super regional. And 2 years later, we were in Omaha. But in any case, the whole point was that term Stony Brooking was coined by Peichel. Because it was the whole thing, because Stony Brook had an inferiority complex. To a degree, I believe it still does. But Peichel tried very hard to get rid of it. And so did Jim Fiore to an extent, but I think it was mostly Peichel.
And I think that's why you catch yourself rooting for him still, even though he's at Rutgers. He was just that kind of a guy, and you're watching him coach at Rutgers, and he's doing the same things at Rutgers as he was doing at Stony Brook, and he's not denying that that's what he's doing, right? This is who he is. This is what he does. And really, Rutgers was a doormat for college basketball for a long time as well, too. They were
the weak sister of the Big East. They were the weak sister of the Big Ten. They were the weak sister of the A-10. I mean, they bounced around. They kind of like Fordham, okay? But it also, and Fordham's been looking for that magic too, and basically they have not found it. Yes, they're getting a little bit better, but not to the same level of turnaround that Rutgers has experienced because they didn't hire Steve Peichel. And that does have a lot to do with it, getting the right guy. I mean, if Fordham had hired Jay Wright, now, of course, the counter argument among the Fordham alumni, many friends of mine, would say Fordham would not have appreciated Jay Wright and run him out in 5 years. But Jay Wright was basically... Yeah, first of all, he started out at Villanova as an assistant under Raleigh Massimino, got his head coaching chops at Hofstra, developed those, and then came back to Villanova when the time came. And he's been there ever since, and he's led them to unprecedented success. But, so he was always going to be at Villanova. But when you come to a guy of that character and a guy who can change the culture on his character alone, you're looking for a Peichel. You're looking for a Jay Wright. Yeah,
I think that's a really good point. I think he really is the next. And when you watch Rutgers play and when you watch Stony Brook play, they play hard. They play good defense. They don't make mistakes. They don't beat themselves. They're enjoyable to watch.
Hey, we Stony Brook. Look, we hit those America East finals. And yes, it was kind of like almost an on-the-job training for Steve Peichel as well, because they'd forget how to shoot threes. There'd be some aspect of their game that would be missing. And finally, I think Jameel Warney, more than anybody, got the message, because in 2016, 6 years ago, Stony was going to happen again. Stony Brook was dead in the water against Vermont and said, here we go again, off to the NIT. Jameel Warney said, no, I will carry this team to the NCAA if it kills me. over 43, I believe it was on the afternoon, and he did carry the team on his back to victory.
Now, Ken, a couple really exciting games now that go back to the NCAA tournament. North Carolina, UCLA. What do you think?
Oof, that's just so tough. UCLA, obviously, just so much history there as a program. They got the most national titles out of everyone. I think just how hot UNC has been all season. They really haven't looked weak to me at many, if any point this season. It's tough to root against them right now. My bracket does have UCLA putting up the upset. I don't know why. It's just how it is.
You know what? I think that win UNC over Duke in Cameron Indoor Stadium on the last night for Mike Krzyzewski has really made this team believe. So I can really see UNC winning that. We go to the, St. Peter's is waiting for Texas and Purdue to finish. Right now, I got 52-52 Arizona and TCU, but there's still 14 minutes left in the game, so plenty of time there. Kansas and Providence, I think that's Kansas, right? That matchup right there, I think Kansas is just too good. I think Providence is having a nice run, but I think Kansas is too good.
Hey, we saw Kansas early in the season. Providence, I mean, they got to a point in the Big East tournament. We're not going to win it. Let's go get set for the tournament for the NCAA. Providence can fool you, though. Providence, they're capable of it. I mean, yes, I think Kansas will eventually prevail, but I think it's going to be close.
If Arizona does hold off and beat TCU, which is what you expect to happen, Arizona, Houston's playing really well right now.
They're playing tremendous basketball. I remember 5 seed as well. And I know they had a strong outing back on their first round matchup on Friday. And yeah, the Cougars are a team where they're really good, really from 3-point range. They shot 47% in the win against the Dragons. And they're really good at cleaning up the glass. So if they remain consistent doing both of those things, I can see them going pretty far.
Well, if that's the case, now, again, University of Houston, of course, is the member Phi Slamma Jamma, again, Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler, who, of course, both Hall of Famers, going up against Patrick Ewing and Georgetown, 84, and then going to the national championship game twice and losing, one to NC State and one to Georgetown. And then, of course, getting revenge 10 years later in the NBA Finals, but that's another story. It's been a while since Houston was this deep in a tournament. And
being Illinois helped put them up there today, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to check because I don't think they've been this deep since those days.
Yeah, and I think they got it going a little bit. I was watching the end of the game there today, and they were like celebrating the. I don't know if you guys saw this, but they were celebrating in the locker room, and they like show like pictures of guys who are like celebrating and stuff. And the coach takes off his shirt and he's like dancing around with the players as well too. And they're going crazy for him as well. So they've got something special going on as well. But I guess everybody's got to feel like right now that they've got something going on special, right? They're in the Sweet 16. They've got something that's special. When I look at the
correction, Houston went deep last year. Okay, that 2021, the one where I don't think anybody was even allowed in the building, but yeah, they went 28-4 under Kelvin Sampson, and TBD obviously, but they did win the American Conference Championship, and they went to let's see, that was that they got to the Final Four, I believe, didn't they? But go on.
So if you look into the West bracket and you look at Gonzaga is playing Arkansas, and you really feel like Gonzaga, is the favorite, obviously, in that game. They have the overall number 1 seed. They brought up an example today because they were saying who's going to be the next Mike Krzyzewski. And I thought Mark Few would be the next one. He's a guy, Duke was terrible when Krzyzewski took him over, right? And for a couple of years there, they didn't think Krzyzewski was going to last. Mark Few has built that Gonzaga program up, and the only thing he has left to do is to win a national championship, right? And when you bring up Gonzaga now, you're talking NCAA basketball. You're talking number one seed.
Yeah,
right?
consistently at that. Right. That's been the biggest difference since he's gotten there is that they're just consistently year in, year out the past few years, they're a number one seed. And, they're not a team that gets upset lightly. They are consistently dominant. They have long runs. And as you said, if there's really a guy who could definitely fit that bill, he's going to need the championship first and then a few more after that. But yeah, still in the hunt for his first.
Yeah, but I think it was the idea that you built something.
Right.
And you built something that now is there to last. Right. And I think he's got it going right there. That'd be an interesting one right there. Do you think St. Peter's has got enough to keep it going?
They're the Cinderella team, man. So this team you just don't want to count out because, they've been rolling since the end of their regular season. Right. And they've been overcoming the odds since then. It's, as I said, this Gonzaga team, they're a team that they're not an easy out, obviously. So they're consistently among the top rankings. And I think Cinderella's story ends sadly because the last time they didn't make it past fourth round was back in 2019, 2020 when they lost to BYU. Or rather, that was tournament play. But just going back to just March Madness, they're a team where consistently they're in Sweet 16 so far Sweet 16. National Championship last year, lost to Baylor. Elite 8, Sweet 16, National Championship, Sweet 16, Elite 8. They haven't been knocked out in Sweet 16 since 2014. So, as I said, I don't see the run stopping now. They're a team that's looking to get that national championship that they thought they had last year.
Yeah, I mean, and they have the Timmy returning, and he's got to be looking for one, right?
He's going to be a top draft pick for sure. He's not one. He's definitely going to be up there. He's just so dominant. I think he's a guy who he looks like the big kid, and everyone else is trying to play at that level. That's how good he is.
So as I'm looking through the scores here, it looks like Purdue is actually just taking down Texas. They win by 10. So it'll be St. Peter's versus Purdue, and I think that will be a really interesting matchup. For the tournament as well, too. I think that's going to be a style of play. Whoever gets their style of play going is going to win that game.
I think Purdue's been really dominant, especially today, getting to the free throw line. They had 33 free throws in today's contest. They have 46 attempts, made 33 of them. More free throws made than field goals made. 21 field goals, 33 free throws. So they're a team where they got a lot of bigs. They crash the glass and dominate. 32 defensive rebounds. They don't give up second chances. So for St. Peter's, they got to knock it down on their first offensive possession each time because they're not going to get many second chances.
Yeah, and if Purdue's game plan is to get you in foul trouble and get St. Peter's bench into the game, that would probably be how I would attack it as the coach. Is I would look to be very aggressive on the offensive end, try to get your players in foul trouble, and then get your backups on because your bench isn't going to be as deep as Purdue's bench. Let's be honest. If you're St. Peter's, they're
going to be a tough matchup Sunday for UNC or UCLA, whichever team wins tomorrow. Because as I said, this Purdue team has been on fire as of late, and they're just so good at getting to the line. That's a tough team to beat.
Yeah. Now that we're looking at the 16 of them, this is going to be a nice Sweet 16 here. I don't really think that there's too many teams. I don't know. I think that any one of the teams could win in the 16 now. I think the least likely to would be St. Peter's because of everything that they've done so far. But every other team you're looking at, you say to yourself, I can see them. I could see Arkansas beating Gonzaga, even though I expected Gonzaga. I have Gonzaga winning the whole thing in my bracket. I can see Texas Tech beating Duke, right? UNC North Carolina is a coin toss for me, right? So, and like Matt, you were saying, Providence over Kansas, that could happen.
Judging from what they've been able to do all season, yes, you can't rule them out. I like the depth of their talent. And, Kansas, of course, they showed Stony Brook something early in the season, but I don't necessarily think they're the overwhelming power they have been in past years.
Yeah, the name is carrying more weight than the players are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But I think that's the case, too, is that in this tournament and in recent years, there aren't too many not even Duke, for example. I mean, a 2 seed. Villanova, yes, of course they did, win the Big East again, and but nobody really overwhelms. Nobody has a clear path, I think, to a national championship, particularly with the upsets that we've had. I mean, North Carolina, yes, beating Duke, as you said, at Cameron Indoor Stadium in the final game of Krzyzewski's final game there, made them into North Carolina again. You know what I mean? Because they had been struggling. They're mid-pack in the ACC all year. And people thought this was going to be an off year. But all of a sudden, they're alive again, and they're dangerous again, and UCLA may have their work cut out.
Oh, absolutely. They got their work cut out for sure. And the UCLA is a higher seed. They're 4 to UNC's 8. But this 8 seed UNC is not an 8 seed. You know what I mean? Like, this to be an even level matchup for both teams.
However, St. Peter's, first of all, mid-majors and alumni of mid-majors and fans of mid-majors are all, of course, rooting for the underdogs and the Loyolas and the St. Peter's and all the other big upset schools, even Vermont, believe it or not. But in any case, the thing that really turns us on is that the gaps have been narrowing for years, and it's been happening for the past 20 years or so. It really, and maybe a little less than 20. Obviously, the first obvious case was when George Mason went to the Final Four out of the CAA. Okay. The thing that bothers me is I think the selection committee is a little bit behind the times, giving 9 bids to the Big Ten, leaving 3 at-larges that should have gone to the A-10, only sending 2. Okay? The record is bearing out. The upsets, the mid-majors going deep, are telling you that the game of college basketball is changing. And it's no longer about the same 5 teams in the Final Four, in alternating years. It's changing because the talent gap is narrowing. It's kind of what happened in football when they shortened the rosters in FBS football. The Boise States of the world are finally saying, "Hi, we deserve a shot at the national championship." They go to a playoff, which they threw a bone because no mid-major's going to the playoff. The only way a mid-major wins anything is if they're an FCS and they make a deep run. But in the NCAA basketball tournament, a 15 can win it all. A 16 can win it all. Mm-hmm. But we've been seeing more and more of those double-digit seeds going deep. Winning first-round games, winning second-round games, advancing to the Sweet 16. You can't ignore them anymore. And yet, for some strange reason, the selection committee continues to do so.
There's a great quote by Dean Smith from years ago, obviously. And he was talking about the NCAA tournament just as an example. And he's like, listen, it's the NCAA tournament. It's not the NBA playoffs. I don't have to win 18 holes. I just have to win 1. Right? And that's really what the NCAA tournament's all about. I don't have to be better than you 18 times. I don't have to beat you 4 out of 3 times. 4 out of 7. I just have to beat you once.
Right.
And I just have to, and then every good night. And Matt, when you see somebody do it, or you see a team do it, and then you're on a mid-major team, well, why can't we do it? St. Peter's just did it.
Exactly.
Well, why can't I do it, Loyola?
Yeah, Stony Brook, the guys in the locker room are saying, "Hey, we beat those guys."
Right. Why can't we do it?
Yeah.
Right? So the more and more that occurs, you're right. UMBC just did it. Right?
Yeah, knocking over, and then Virginia wins it the following year. Talk about a bounce back.
Right. So you just kind of say to yourself, like, if they can knock them off, well, why can't we knock them off? Right. I'm not looking to win 18 holes. Just 1. That's all I have to do. Right. And what a different perspective when you think about it that way. And that's why the NCAA tournament is so good, because you don't have to win one of these series, because I think it's just too difficult to win a 7-game series, right? You only have to win a 1-game series. And I think that makes it fun.
Oh, absolutely. Just the atmosphere about it too. It's nothing like the college atmosphere, and they're in different regions as well. But you still see fans coming out and supporting, just being loud and raucous. It's just a great time. I think it's a great experience. Watching and listening to these games.
Okay, we got a caller.
Awesome.
Hi guys.
Yeah.
Jay from Center Reach. Jay from Center Reach. Go ahead.
No, I was just listening to you talking about the tournament, and I think you made some good points. And even though I'm sort of a Big Ten fan, and I was happy for Coach Peichel and happy for Indiana that I went to graduate school to get in, you can't have 9 teams in and then only get, whatever they get, 2 into the Sweet 16. I mean, they ought to. I think if I was in charge, I would make a rule sort of like what they have for bowl games, that in bowl games you have to have at least a 500 record to be eligible for a bowl game. So I would say that if you don't have a 500 record in your conference, you can't go to the NCAA unless you win your conference tournament. So then you don't have all
in most cases that they do that.
But if 2/3 of the Big Ten got in, obviously there's some teams there that had less than 500 records in their conference. So.
But the in conference, yes, but overall they're all over. But that's always the case. And even the Big East and all the power conferences, even the America East, they're good. Some teams with sub 500 records were overall better because they had good non-conference records. But the whole point here is not so much that. Are there 9 good teams in the Big Ten? Sure. The only problem is there are teams in other conferences that are probably better who got snubbed.
Well, that's my point. You got to let some of these other teams in. Indiana just had all they could do to beat Wyoming. Rutgers. That game with Notre Dame could have gone either way. But there's all kinds of teams like that. Greg was talking a minute ago about when UMBC beat Virginia. They did it with a player who used to play for Virginia. I mean, that's getting to the point you made about the talent being, leveling out. And we've seen that, too, where a lot of people from the America East have gone on to play at mid-major schools and, been at least rotation players, maybe not stars, but, I can't remember where it was. Sam Sessoms, who killed us when he was at Binghamton, was playing somewhere this year on national TV. I remember, my head jerked up when I heard his name called. And the year after Villanova won the title, there was a guy from Albany who used to kill us. He went to Villanova as a graduate transfer and was in their rotation. And there's other examples that are out there.
Jay, I have a question. I think that's an interesting thing where you have to be above 500 in the conference. That's a really one. You'd have to look back, right, and do almost like and mathematically look back at the stats of other teams and what they've done. I've always felt, though, you should have more than 20 wins to make the tournament unless you win your conference tournament and to get in, right? Like 20 wins should be, for me, the barometer to get in. What do you think about that?
It's probably too low a bar because I think all these teams that probably have 20 wins. I think, especially when your non-conference schedule is made up of mostly teams not as good as you, when you're from a bigger conference.
But it works for Michigan right now with that argument because Michigan's 19-14, and that includes the NCAA tournament, right? So, I think if you're one of those, Power 5 teams, I think you have to have 20 wins. I'm just trying to think of other things that you could do. I do like the 500 record in the conference. I think that's interesting. To do
then
that.
You're relative, you're relative to your peers. So you're not, even if you're, whatever the ninth best team in the big. That means there's 8 teams in your own conference that are better than you. So whatever,
right.
And you think about it when you get to whatever we have, like 34, I think it is at-large bids. That 1/4 of them are going to the Big Ten. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. That really is. So I do think you're right, and I think basically we're all kind of agreeing here. I think the mid majors are starting to have a huge impact on the tournament, and rightfully, you have to admit that that's going on, and therefore, in years coming up, more mid majors should get in. I think you're probably looking at a situation where you have to start to consider a team from a mid major that runs the table, but then loses in the in the conference championship, and then you wind up getting a team from the conference that is, have an average season, you'd start taking that team as well too.
Yeah, I mean, they were talking to the head of the selection committee last weekend, and they referred to those teams as bid stealers, as if like they don't deserve to be there. Which is kind of not fair.
Well, they didn't exactly steal them. The selection committee stole them for them. I mean, that's where the selection committee. I don't understand what the operating philosophy is here.
Yeah.
I mean, is it to get? That's the other thing. The NCAA tournament pie. Okay, that very big pie. It's like one of those Guinness World Record pies because it is huge, and that's one of the reasons why so many schools 20 years ago in particular, Stony Brook included, upgraded their athletic programs to get a piece of that pie. Because getting into the NCAA gives you a pile of money. Going deeper into the NCAA gets you a bigger pile of money. And that's why the mid-majors really started to take their programs a lot more seriously. And that's why we have that is a contributing factor. And you know what, guys? You could do a PhD thesis on this. I bet people have, on the effect of that big NCAA tournament pie has had on athletics across the board. I mean, you still have some schools that dig their heels and saying, we're staying in D3 because we don't need the money, we have big endowments, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? The Ivy League champion gets a piece of the NCAA tournament pie. So they take it seriously, even though they got plenty of money. But then you have the UAA, where you have NYU, University of Chicago, Washington University, St. Louis. Oh, yeah, we're proud to be in D3. Yeah, right, whatever. Nobody cares about them anymore. But the point still remains that Stony Brook definitely upgraded to D1 for two reasons. Number one, they're a big state school. They couldn't find anybody to play them. And number two, they want a piece.
Yeah, and JD, to your point too, I look at the first four, and we spoke about it last week, I think briefly. I look at the first four in the NCAA tournament here, so it's like the 60, 68. I always kind of looked at that and said, why don't you instead of putting a Power 5 team in there and playing in those, why don't you make those 8 teams be these mid-major teams and see, let them get a game in and then go to the from the out bracket into the tournament bracket. I'd rather that be, teams, 68, 67, 66, 65, down to 60 to 68, and have those be the teams that play in that section instead of adding the big Power 5 conferences in.
The year that Stony Brook got in, I think me and a lot of other people were actually hoping we got a play-in game so we'd get a chance to get our feet wet before we had to take on Kentucky.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because you realize, okay, it really is just playing basketball. We're just doing it in a bigger arena. Yeah,
because if you look at what happened even last year with the women, it was great that they got in. They were all excited, but that game was over in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And hey, just a shout out.
Unfortunately, Jay, I think there's still a big divide between the Power 5 conferences in women's basketball. That divide is still there, or is larger in women's basketball than it is in men's basketball.
It's getting narrower, but compared to 20 years ago when Stony Brook first entered, it was huge. The Power 5, that's where the best basketball was being played, and there was a big drop off after that. But it has gotten narrower, has gotten better.
Yeah, I think it's probably like it's going to lag, like in many things, like it'll lag the men's game. But as more young women play basketball and there's more good players, it'll over time that'll narrow too, as we're seeing in the men's game now. I think. I just wanted to give a shout out to Vermont for not only the game they played. I didn't get the call in. It was only last weekend, I guess, but the way they destroyed UMBC, that was a very impressive game, and then giving Arkansas a good run there, so they deserve that. A good shout-out for them, though.
Well, it was Vermont's year. I think we all kind of acknowledge that. Naturally, as fans of the Seawolves, we were hoping that if I still do believe, and I think everybody will agree with me, that if the bomb hadn't been dropped, Stony Brook would have given Vermont a better run for their money, but Vermont was running away with the conference. And, it's really no surprise that they end up winning it. And, you have to give them the respect they deserve for doing so. Of course, we don't have to deal with them anymore. But we're going to deal with another can of worms in a much tougher conference, the CAA, next year.
Mm-hmm. I actually, looking at my bracket, I almost picked Vermont to upset Arkansas there. I just
it was possible.
Watching them, and
they've done it before. They knocked off Syracuse in the 13.
Yeah, but watching them play this year, they were so good. They could shoot it. They could get on the inside. I mean, they really didn't have any weaknesses. And based on the score, 75-71. So that was a really good game. So it was one of those. I just couldn't write Vermont on my bracket. I just couldn't do it.
We're all still reeling over the whole America East thing, and I still believe that I find it ironic that Stony Brook players still win Player of the Week awards in the America East Conference. It's like, look, we can't compete in the tournament. We're essentially dead to you as it is. Why do you bother?
Well, I think that's the one thing we talked about in the past about not taking it out on the players so much as the schools. So this is maybe one way to not take it out on the players.
Yeah, Jay, I think I'm 100%. Like after I thought about it for a while, I said to myself, you know what? The players deserve the recognition of being all conference or first team or second team or Player of the Week. So if they've earned it, then it's important to them. It's special for them because they get to walk away and say that they were an all conference player. And then that's a big deal.
Yeah. I think when you were talking earlier about the women's basketball team, hey, first of all, nice that two America East schools got into the women's NIT this year. Not not just Stony Brook, but also, that's probably a record, which that they actually took that three teams made the postseason from the America East. But the coach of the women's basketball team, she got named to. I hope she's around for a little while, but she got named to some list of black women mid-major coaches to watch, and there was only 12 people on the list. So other people are noticing her too.
Yeah, that raised my eyebrow as well too. Thinking about that as well, like hope she is going to be around. I do think she is because of what we spoke about earlier in the show, and that was the idea about what is she going to do with her players. So I think as a head coach, she's got to prove that she can bring in some recruiting classes and then mold them into the team that she wants them to be.
Well, Another thing, I think with Steve Peichel, we thought that when he finally breaks through the glass ceiling, he's going to get picked up by somebody, but not before. And as it turns out, minutes after he wins the championship for the American East in 2016, he gets a job at Rutgers. But I don't think that happens unless he wins. I don't think he gets that job offer unless he wins that championship. I think that the Power 5 schools were looking at him, I think, over the years, but nobody was willing to pull the trigger until he broke through. Because they didn't want a guy who hasn't won anything. Okay, you can justify it to the alumni and the fans and the students saying, okay, this guy's hot. This guy just won the America East. This guy's going to turn around for us. As it turns out, he did.
Yeah, and he just got an extension, too, this past week. So credit to him for that. Yes, he did.
Deservedly so.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
And even the same thing, Matt, what you were just saying, the same thing happened with the women's coach last year. She gets into the tournament, and then another school hired her away. It happened at Hofstra a few years back, too, when their women's team made the tournament.
Well, that is just the way things are as a mid-major. Yeah. I mean, you expect first of all, this is not a place people go to retire, number one. Number two, this is a place where you are looking for, as an athletic director, a young, up-and-coming coach. You're not going to get, look, Jim Calhoun came out of retirement to coach. He's coaching some team whose name I forget, actually, but he is coaching.
I think it's a Division III school, actually.
A Division III school. Rick Pitino came back to coach. He's at Iona, so he's just basically going back to his roots. And so because they can't, it's in their blood. They don't have anything better to do. But do I think Mike Krzyzewski's going to come out of retirement? I don't know. But do I necessarily think that Stony Brook will be making a move for him if he does?
Well, I think the thing about Calhoun and Pitino is that they both kind of had to leave under not the best of circumstances.
Also true. I mean, Krzyzewski's they're kind of looking to the squeakiest of squeaky clean records, but the fact remains is that he's retiring on his own terms, unless you take a look at the AT&T commercial, he can't get a job there. But
I saw that today. It was a pretty funny commercial, actually.
Yeah, that's smart. It's smart.
I'm only available week to week. And gosh, what game was I watching that Larry Brown is Memphis? He's an assistant coach at Memphis. Larry Brown.
Yes.
He's like
he doesn't have to deal with the pressures of being the head coach.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these guys do that. I mean, in their semi-retirement years, they don't want the heat of being the head coach, so they just hang around as an assistant.
I thought there was rumors that he was going to be like the East Hampton High School coach at one point in time.
That would not surprise me.
Yeah,
I mean, you can afford to buy a place out there. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Guys, it is 11:59. So, Jay from Center Reach, many thanks for calling, and please continue to listen. But
okay, great show, guys.
Okay, so we are, of course, coming up to the 12 o'clock hour, and that, of course, is the perfect time to remind you of upcoming sports broadcasts here on WUSB. Did earlier, we'll do it again. They are as follows. Quiet week this week as far as broadcasts are concerned, because we are not back on the air until Saturday, March 26th, and that will be women's lacrosse versus Vermont, and that is a 12:45 p.m. start here on WUSB.